Well, my opponent, again, I have never talked about his position on oil. And by the way, and I'm going to address this actually in the next question, but I think the question the young man asked, which was never answered, was did he support drilling in Alaska? I don't think he answered the question.
I do.
That's okay.
This is his
I wanted
time.
to
Let
facilitate
him
your ability to actually get a straight answer, and apparently I did. Thank you. I want to address this energy issue when I have 3 minutes. But the fact of the matter is, the chairman of my campaign runs a retail operation. Has nothing whatsoever to do with the price of oil. As a matter of fact, he's the largest seller of ethanol in the state of Tennessee and the largest seller of biodiesel in the country. And somehow, Congressman Ford has a problem with that. I'm not sure I understand what the problem is. I strongly support biofuels. Thank you, Robin.
Our next question is for Mr. Corker, and it is from Patrick Davis.
Good evening, Mr. Corker. In Tennessee, the availability of health care is limited for not only senior citizens, but for everyone. From my perspective, 2 of the major problems are the issues of medical liability reform and the current Medicare funding shortfall. What are your positions on tort reform and overhaul of the Medicare system?
Okay. Well, as opposed to my opponent, I'm a strong supporter of tort reform. I've traveled all around the state of Tennessee. I've met with people, with women. I was with a lady the other day in Wayne County. And I don't know if you know this, but in the 91 non-urban counties of the state of Tennessee, OBGYN services have dropped by 40% since 1996. One of the big reasons for that is the tremendous high cost of health care. The other reason of malpractice in insurance. And the other thing that's happening all across the state of Tennessee is there's tremendous amounts of defensive medicine that are taking place. I really do believe that we need to have tort reform that affects the malpractice end of practicing medicine. I really believe that that is something that will lower tremendously the administrative cost of health care. But I think we need to do a lot of other things. Again, my opponent opposes that, and yet I bump into women all across this state that have to drive 50, 80, 100 miles in some cases just to get OBGYN services, the kind that they want. I think we need to do a lot of things. I think we need to use technology. Technology to lower the cost of the administrative side of health care. I think it's ridiculous that you go into a physician's office, you fill out a chart, you go to the next office, you fill out another chart, and yet none of that information is shared. And I've met with companies in the state of Tennessee that have the ability to lower those costs. We need to do everything we can to make sure that Americans are not paying double what Canadians are paying for prescription drugs. We need to make sure that we cause health care to be deductible for individuals, which now it's only deductible for businesses. We need to make sure that health savings accounts continue. And one of the things I think we need to do for small business is allow them to band together so that they have purchasing power like bigger entities do in order to make sure that their employees have health care. My opponent voted against association health plans 3 or 4 times, but when he began to run for the Senate, changed. We have a lot of differing views as it relates to what ought to happen with health care, but that's one of those issues that I want to take the energy, the focus, the background that I've had to do everything I can to ensure that Tennesseans and Americans have the opportunity for affordable and accessible health care. Thank you.
Mr. Ford?
One of the shortcomings of my opponent's positions is that his party has been in charge now for 12 years. 6 years they've controlled the House, the Senate, and the White House, and the courts. When I was a child, there was a board game called Monopoly, which I still think exists today. His party has a monopoly, and they have not fixed any of this. If the chairman of my campaign ran an oil company, I'd be trying to explain it away as he just did now as well. The truth of the matter is they're not the biggest seller of biodiesel, nor are they the biggest seller of ethanol. Health care, 2 things. Let Medicare negotiate directly with the drug companies. You'd reduce by $1 trillion. I didn't hear that. Tort reform, I'm for it. I'm just not for the tort reform that his party's tried to push on his party. His party hadn't been able to pass it in the House or the Senate because they're fighting amongst one another. We need a different way. Carve out the physicians, set reasonable caps, and allow physicians to practice medicine. That's what I've done in the House, And if I get to the Senate, if you send me there, that's what I'm going to do there as well.
Our next question is for Mr. Ford, and it is from Derek Gosma.
Thanks for the opportunity to ask you this question, sir.
Thank you, sir.
What experiences and personal attributes do you possess that you feel qualify you to govern effectively at the national level?
It's a great question. Thank you, and that's one of the great deficits in Washington, in addition to the fiscal deficit that's been run up over the years. I've never voted for a budget that was not balanced. Is that there doesn't seem to be the comedy, and there doesn't seem to be the willingness to sit down and work through issues and work through serious problems. I've tried my hardest in my short time there. I partnered with a Republican from Wisconsin to found the faith-based caucus in the Congress. I partnered with a Republican from Nebraska who was also a football coach named Tom Osborne to found the National Service Caucus in the Congress. I worked with John McCain in the Senate to pass legislation shortly after the awful occurrence and tragic occurrence on 9/11 to give young people more of an opportunity to serve their country, do a big service act. My short time in the Congress, I've made Republicans as mad as Democrats because I side on what's right. If someone has an idea, I don't look to see if there's a D next to their name or an R next to their name. I go sit with them and work with them. When we learn of the most gigantic and most embarrassing failure in my short life in corporate governance, after Enron failed, I worked with Mike Oxley, the chairman of the Financial Services Committee, a Republican. I worked with Mike Castle from Delaware, a Republican. I worked with all of my Republican colleagues on the committee to pass a balanced piece of legislation. That's what we need. Now, I side with President Bush when I think he's right, and I go against him when I think he's wrong. If you want a rubber stamp, don't vote for me. If you want someone who will look a Democrat in the eye and say, you're wrong, if you want someone who will look a Republican in the eye and say, you're right, if you want someone to look a Democrat in the eye when he or she's right and say, you know what, I'm with you, or a Republican in the eye when they're wrong and tell them the same, I'm asking for your vote and your prayers in this race, because the good Lord knows if there's anything we need more of in Washington, it's a group of adults who are willing to sit down, recognize our challenges, and work through them to solve them. I've done it for 10 years in the Congress. And by the way, they do all this talking about me being liberal. I was the one that ran against Nancy Pelosi to be the leader of the Democrats because I believe there's a better way, a more rational way, a way where you reach out to Democrats in your party who are conservative, and you even reach out to Republicans who want to pass sound and good legislation.
Mr. Corker?
Thank you. Well, I know my opponent talks a great deal about being independent. I just want to make sure that everyone knows that 88% of the time he votes like Ted Kennedy and Hillary Clinton. So it's not quite as independent as you might think. All of my life, I've worked right here in Chattanooga in this state to really bring people together to solve problems. I did that as a mayor here in the community and put tremendous energy out. And I think you saw that even when issues were difficult to deal with, I stayed the course. A lot of those came up during my tenure as mayor. When I was Commissioner of Finance, we only had 35 Republicans in the House, a 99-member body. We had a minority in the Senate, yet we passed every single thing we needed to pass to make our state stronger. And I think the papers have written about the tremendous applause that when I left there, both sides of the aisle showed. If you want somebody who really knows how to bring people together, who will be independent, is not going to kowtow to anybody, then please elect me to the United States Senate. Thank you.